Hi everyone, welcome to another ad hoc gentle introduction video. As you know, I tend to release these as the mood takes me, and this episode we're going to be looking at LangChain in combination with Ollama, and we're going to be running this in a Python, in a Jupyter Notebook. Now, this doesn't look much like a gentle introduction, but what I want you to do is just make sure in the description section you had the appropriate resources to reference if you want to. You don't have to read any of this first bit that I'm going to walk you through. The only bit you really need to know about, if you don't have anything installed, if you don't have Anaconda installed or any way of accessing Jupyter Notebooks, then you will need to do this final bit. And again, as I always do, I've broken this down into chunks. So I'm just going to go through and sort of show you where the bits and pieces are to put this together, and I will include links to all of this and also my final workbook with additional comments in it as well, and I'll put that up on my GitHub. I'll deep link to where it is on my GitHub. So I'm just trying to think how this all originally started out. It's one of those interesting rabbit holes that I've gone down almost spontaneously. I think it really started from me reading this particular paper. And the funny thing is I can't remember how I ended up getting this paper, but a couple of weeks ago I stumbled across it. I think I was looking at, I think I've become interested in how people were sort of implementing LLMs in production, because you see a lot of stuff to do with, this is how you use an LLM, or dive in online, start using OpenAI or whatever. But that's one thing. Where it gets really interesting is when you start looking at, okay, what could you build with this apart from just using it as a way of generating training materials, or like I do as a sort of variant on, I suppose, what they're calling vibe coding now, which is back in the day was called exploratory coding. So I'm sort of using exploratory coding with AI as a sort of I'm trying to think of the right word here for this, but when you're doing that pair programming type thing. So in going and looking at this, I then end up going down a LangChain rabbit hole. So let's talk about LangChain, how you can set your system up to play around with it. Full disclosure, actually, on this, I forgot to bring it up. Let me see if I can find it, because if you've dived in and not seen my previous episodes, you may not realise what sort of machine I'm running. So let me just see if I've still got this. Yeah, so I've installed it on 2 machines now, and just for reference, these are the 2 that I've installed it on, and it's running fine in the current incarnation. Obviously this is dependent on what sort of language models you choose to run. So I'm running the real, bargain basement's the wrong word, but I'm basically running distilled versions through Ollama. But as you can see, there's nothing particularly egregious here. I mean, both of these machines, I would say, are well over 5 years old. This might be a little bit newer than that. This certainly is well over 5 years old. The key bit here, in some ways, is, in terms of running Ollama, and we'll get on to how you install that in a moment if you've not seen my other videos. This is, I believe, the bare minimum. This is what I have currently. but it's good enough for me just playing around. Obviously over time I'll probably end up creating a dedicated machine to do this. In the actual fact, I've got 2 of those elite books, and one of them I've sort of just purely dedicated to playing around with large language models, just to compartmentalize it onto a single machine. But again, if you had a big enough system, you could go down all sorts of virtualization rabbit holes as well if you wanted to. Anyway, so that's where we are now. That's where I am today in terms of I'm just sort of exploring this. So I include a link to here. I'm not going to talk much about a LangChain, its history, but you can read about it. There are some interesting podcasts. What do I do there? So if we let me just try and go back a step here, maybe. Yeah, there we go. This is a really interesting podcast, Training Data. It's been running since 6th of the 5th. So that's, it's running another, so it's June, 5th of June, 2024. And the second episode they did was talking to Harrison Chase. I'll include a deep link to the actual episode, and also I did a nice search on Apple Podcasts for anything that mentions LangChain, so there's that as well. You'll find if you listen to the episode, in it they're talking a lot about cognitive architecture, which is a huge chasm to go down. And at one point, I think I'm going to have to do a video that talks about the overlap of different disciplines in AI with things like cognitive science and philosophy. I think that'll be an interesting, gentle introduction to do the different facets, if you like. But cognitive architecture goes back quite a long way, as you can see. And there is this book as well, obviously from 1983, and obviously it's a lot more about the underlying philosophy, I suppose, because of course it's not going to be talking about, at that point, large language models. It may well be talking about some of the components of large language models, because a lot of the stuff that is poured into the large language model pot, if you like, goes back a long way, a lot further than people actually realise probably. I'll also include some searches on Arxiv. I always mispronounce this. Arxiv, I think that's how you say it. Anyway, ARXIV, for LangChain and also cognitive architecture, and a link to the paper which, like I said, started this all off. This is from November 2024, so the end of last year when this video is going out. Also, before we actually get on to really what this video is about, in essence, the practical side, this is definitely a book worth checking out. 100-page machine learning book. I remember checking it out. It's been out for quite a while now. The good thing with this, it operates under the, where is it? Yeah, read first, buy later principle. So you can actually read it on the website, and then if you like it, decide to buy it. Also, the author has brought out this, the 100-page language models book, which I haven't got around to having a look at yet. And it's done under the same thing. So, yeah, read first, buy later principle. And you can obviously pick these up on the appropriate websites if you want to buy like a physical copy for it. But I'd include links to those as well. Another interesting book, just generally, is this deep learning book. And you can just read this online for free. Which, has, again, a lot of the underlying theories. This was published way before our current situation with large language models. So yeah, that's all the resource material if you're interested in that side of things. Okay, so how do you set yourself up? Well, the first thing, you need some sort of Python environment. You can keep it really simple. I personally use Anaconda just because that's what I've always used. I probably started using it back when I started to do data science courses several years ago. And probably off of one of those, I had to install it and then just sort of fell in love with using it. But I've installed other things as well, variants, bits and pieces of Python ecosystems. Even to the point, at one point I seem to remember that, I don't know if it's still there, Microsoft had a free machine learning lab which you could run Python in. I used to use that quite a bit, and also doing things like running Jupyter Notebooks online, those sort of things. But the nice thing with Anaconda is it has everything in it that you need, including Spider, Jupyter Notebooks. You can install R in it as well, and a whole load of other things. I'm not going to fire up the interface because it takes a while to load. But anyway, so you'll need to install something like this. The bare minimum to do what I'm doing is you're going to need Python with Jupyter Notebooks, because that's what we're using for this one. So that's I would do that first. I'd get that out of the way. Then you need to go to the LangChain website. And the nice thing is that all the other instructions for everything else, including installing Ollama, which I actually also have pre-installed already anyway, it's instructions on how to install that. Ollama's really easy to install, and then how you pull down the particular large language model you're going to be using. So I'm using the Python version of the website to walk through this. There is a JavaScript version, which no doubt I'll probably look at some point, but I won't necessarily do a video on that. So this is where I would suggest starting this tutorial. Specifically, the easiest thing I think myself is to start off with chat models and prompts, and then you can dig deeper. And that's all we're going to focus on, really simple chat model stuff, which probably isn't leveraging LangChain to its full potential. Well, definitely isn't, but it's just I would do that as a starting point. I'd always suggest that you start off with a simple prompt, and then a simple sort of grabbing of the answer. That's a great way to start things off with all of this stuff, and then you can build out from there, get more complicated. But it's a good thing to understand how that works. So we're going to go down that rabbit hole here. There are other rabbit holes you can go down. We're not going to install Langsmith or LangGraph. I know at some point, if you're really diving deep with it, you've got to go down that rabbit hole in terms of debugging stuff, but I'm going to stay away from that particular hole, chasm, whatever you want to call it. We're going to get straight into here. So now we get into the setup. So as always, just to speed things up a bit in terms of the setup side of things, I've already done all this, but I'll just walk you through it. So I'm running Anaconda, so I want to do the Conda install. If you weren't and just were running some sort of Python with Python or Jupyter Notebooks, and you've got pip installed, then yeah, you can use pip. I'm using Conda, so I obviously ran this at the command prompt, and if you run that at the command prompt, and I specifically ran it at the Anaconda command prompt, which again, when you install Anaconda, you can see here, and it's gone through and yeah, done everything. You'll get asked about doing whether you want to proceed or not. You also might find some of the stuff's already been installed. As you're running this, you'll see that there's various progress bars that complete as well. So yeah, job done. So that's that bit. Like I said, not going to talk about installing Langsmith, but it does mention here, yeah, we're not doing multiple invocations here, so no need at this point. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So using the large language models. When you get down to here, you'll see you get a number of choices. You won't see a llama on here at this point, but we're going to be using a llama. I wanted to run this locally. Okay, but the good news is, if you're for the observant, on here there is this supported integrations link, and if you click on that, it will take you to this page, which has many more things on it. It's really good resources website, so much stuff, really helpful. And we want our friend Ollama, because I'm going to be running our large language models locally here. There are other ways you can run models locally, but I've just, again, stumbled across Ollama, really like using it. And so when you click on that, you end up here. So now we have the setup page, which is really useful. So chat Ollama, and we'll go down. So this is how you pull down in Ollama. And the first thing you need to do before you do anything is you need to set up Ollama, and all that consists of is you basically downloading Ollama and then running it, and it'll do the rest for you. And you just, when you go to the download page for Ollama, you'll see that there's your Windows one. So yeah, just download it, install it, job done. So that's that bit done. And again, I'm not going to do it again. Now, just to show you, if I bring up another administrator window, this is just a straight command shell here. Let me just put that there so you can see this a bit easier. I've already been working with Ollama, so what I did is I ran a llama list just to refresh my memory in terms of what I've got ingressed or pulled into Ollama. I do have llama3.2. In this example, they walk you through, I think, with 3.1. Well, that's what it gets to in the moment. I've modified my notebook accordingly to do 3.2 because that's the one I was using. But of course, if you've got Ollama installed and you've pulled in other models, you can play around with those. Okay, but we're going to stick with Llama 3.1. So to do that, if you don't have it installed, you just do, once you've got Ollama installed, to pull the model down, it's just Ollama pull and then the name of the model. But I'm not going to pull down the earlier version of this. And it is quite fun to play around with the different versions of, a model, like 3.1, 3, 3.2, and just see the differences. That's what's great with having, I think, like local instances that you can mess about with, and tools like LangChain as well. It's got the documentation here. Okay, so installation. So everything else now, you do, as you can see, we're going to be doing inside of our workbook, because we already did that initial. There was a part here, and there we go. So we've already done our sort of initial LangChain installation here, and I did that for Conda. Now we're moving into doing the actual integration, if you like, of LangChain with Ollama. Okay, so the first bit we did was just purely getting LangChain on our system. Now we're doing the LangChain Ollama bit. So I've fired up my instance of Jupyter Notebook. The other advantage with doing this here, instead of you doing like a pip install outside of it, is that you're sort of compartmentalizing this inside of your this particular thing. Now you can compartmentalize it into all sorts of things if you want to, and there's tricks you can do inside of Anaconda which are very clever in terms of compartmentalizing a development environment. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to stick with their sort of a device here. So fired up my notebook, created a new one, and then I went through. I'm using their original instructions here down as far as chaining. So we're just going to look at just the chaining bit. We're not going to do tool calling or multimodal, but again, there's instructions on how you can play around with that, and I'll include links. So here we go. So you can see all ready to go. I've restarted the kernel. I did a safety run of this first. It's all fully commented, and that's how it's going to go up on GitHub. I know it's a bit busy, but some people watching this might not have a too big a familiarity with Python and just want to play around with this if they can get through the installation bit. So so first of all, we need to do inside of Jupyter this pip install of LangChain Ollama, which is the actual line that's doing this is here. So everything with a hash, if you're not familiar with Python, is a comment. So this is the important bit. I've also included a link in the comments themselves as to the particular reference on the LangChain website. Okay, if you want to copy paste that into a browser and do a little bit more, and you can see they're all there for the API reference as well. So everything's good to go here. Okay, so yeah, this will run this. So we'll just run that. Boom. Wait for the star to go away, and we're done. Now, and it says here you may need to restart the kernel to use updated packages. I've actually already run this several times already, so I'm not going to do that, but there are ways on here. It's pretty easy to restart the kernel. So then we're going to run the next one, which is the installation of the actual Ollama part and an update as well, upgrade it to a latest version if an older version is already installed. Okay, so again, straight out of the online workbook. As you can see, we're already satisfied here. No surprise there. I'm not going to reboot it. So then we get into the instantiation. What a lovely word. Instantiation bit. So we're going to import this from this. So from LangChain _ Ollama, import chat Ollama. Initialize a chat Ollama object to configure the language model. So that's what we're going to do. Keeping it really simple, so we just specify the model version. I've changed this from what was in the original text from 3.1 to 3.2 because that's what I'm running. But that's where your model goes. Remember, and also note with this is all hard coded, okay? So, but you could go through and modify this to do all sorts of clever, proper interactions with yourself as well as this runs. But we're using the workbook, and this is generally how I use workbooks. Once I reach a point where I want to have some sort of interaction going on, input boxes come up. At that point is when I normally switch over to using Spider or something else. But at the moment, when you're playing around, Jupyter Notebooks is a really good way of doing it. And the nice thing with this as well, if you really know what you're doing, you can actually configure it to run other languages as well. There's implementations out there that will allow you to, I think, run Closure in a workbook and all sorts of things. So you can run it a bit like a REPL. Yeah, so, or a REPL on steroids. So there, the invocation bit. Import the AI message class from the AI language. So yeah, basically we're just, pulling this stuff in from the modules. So we've already done our first bit here. Oh, actually, sorry, I've jumped ahead there. I didn't finish talking about this, did I? Sorry. So the we need to also set a temperature. So this is this deterministic output. We can set other things as well. So we could go through, and again there's an API reference for that. So let's run that. I got a bit distracted there, never mind. Now we move on to the invocation. So another import. We're breaking this down. You could refactor this so it does this in all one big chunk. But again, that's the advantage of using a notebook like this. You can chunk it. Okay. So more importing going on here. Create a list of messages to be passed to the language model. So here's our message. So we've got the role of the message. We have an instruction to the assistant, because we're saying you are a helpful assistant that translates English to French. Translate the user sentence. And then we have the role of the message. And the user sentence. We're going to invoke, so we're doing the invoke method. And you can see, you think, well, where in this chunk? Well, this is where our original object is. Okay, so there's our chat Ollama object. We're invoking a method on the object to process the list of messages, and there's our messages. At this point we're just going to output the response from the language model, and I've included a link to the API reference specifically for that. There we go. So there it is, but also we're just going to extract just the content section, which is this here, from our message, from our response we've got back. As you can see, there's a lot more in the response here. So I'm just going to run that so you can see the extraction. There you go. And then I added this in. I just thought this is a fun thing to play around with. It's very crude. We're comparing the AI's response to the expected output. You might want a more nuanced check here. So you might want to deal with, say, case insensitivity, partials. You might want to do some sort of external check to any other external translator, or you might want to do some sort of clever mathematical fuzzy matching as well. Lots of options here. Here, yeah, there's none of that. It's really bargain basement checking. The output is correct. Yeah, we're just doing a totally literal check. So now we can do some chaining stuff. Okay, so we're going to need a specific specific class here to do this. Chat prompt template from our module. And of course, all of these modules are here care of the fact we've installed everything that we need. So, okay, so we're going to create a chat prompt template that generates messages dynamically. The system message defines the assistant's role and task using placeholders for input and output languages. The human message is a placeholder for the user input, making the template flexible for various use cases. So it's just, a little bit more flexible version of the previous one because we're chaining. And what we're doing here is we've got like a pipe going on. This is what this pipe command is doing here. So we're combining the prompt with the language model to form a processing chain. So we have our prompt, we have the LLM, which is way back up here. Here's our thing there. So this is now when you get into the real strength, I suppose, of LangChain, is this chaining business. Because this, other bits like this, you could do without you've probably seen in previous videos, I've done something similar without using things like LangChain, but just doing direct requests to the LLM. So here we go. We're going to invoke the chain with specific inputs to perform the translation task. Again, we're hard coding all of this, but you know, that's we're doing this all in a notebook. So yeah, once you were starting to create, you know, in production models, obviously you would progress on into whatever IDE you would want to do that in, and you start to lose your hard codings and start to introduce, you know, more Pythonic elements, more idiomatic elements that would better suit a production model or an in-production model. Okay, so I've modified slightly from what they originally had here, just because I wanted to introduce a print step. So I've got it, you know, going into here in a similar way that we had up here. Same sort of thing. Okay, so if I run this, we'll see in a moment. I'm just going to output the chain very basically. There's the reference to the chain prompt template. Okay, there you go. Same thing again. You can sort of see this AI message. So we get same sort of response back, but it's a response as a result of our chaining. So we're going to extract just to see what we get, and then again we'll just run a little check here. Again, bargain basement check. Like I said in the previous one, you might want a more nuanced check there. And there you go. So I think I'll stop there. It's a good place to stop. But hopefully you enjoyed that real gentle introduction to LangChain. And I will install, I will include all the links on the sort of background info, how you install it, you know, through the LangChain website, and then also a link to my Jupyter Notebook. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.